Welcome to my very first episode of the Perty Nerdy Talk Show. I'm super excited about this. It's a little bit of an experiment slash passion project for me because I have my feet firmly planted both in fiction writing and in tabletop role-playing games. And I thought I would kind of merge the love of my two passions and create a talk show based off of it. I have some upcoming interviews that I'll be releasing with folks in the tabletop role-playing space. But today, my first interview is with Mary DeSantis. She was a pleasure to talk with. She is a self-published author of the Grimmfay series, which we will be discussing in the interview. So I'm not going to ruin anything there, but it was just fantastic to have her on the show and to really delve into what world building looks like from a real world perspective. I think that's what people need. That's the hope for this show, is that for anybody who's just starting their world building journey, their writing journey, that you get experience from folks who have been through the trenches and can share their expertise, their perspectives, their tips and tricks, all of that. So without further ado, let's get to it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Perty Nerdy Talk Show, where I am going to be interviewing folks in the TTRPG space and fiction writing space. I want to share with folks what world builders do, how they do it, so that all of us can learn from others' experiences. So today I have with us Mary DeSantis, also known as the Mistress of Words, as you can see below her very wonderful picture there. Mary, how are you doing today?
Fantastic, Amber. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Me too. I mean, this is kind of a little bit of a passion project slash experiment, but I think that I could have used this back in my day when I was kind of starting my writing journey and hearing what other people do. So I hope it works out. I hope people like this.
Hey, I'm all for being a guinea pig, so let's roll.
You have such a good spirit. Thank you so much. All right. So, Mary, why don't you kind of kick it off and tell us about your journey to where you are today, like how you got into writing or what inspired you. Kind of give us like just your origin story.
Okay, well, back in the day when volcanoes erupted along the earth. No, kidding. Starting over. So I spent many days, weekend afternoons as a kid, kind of curled up in a chair in my dad's office where he would type away at his novel on typewriters, if anybody remembers typewriters.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And,
I actually I'm going to, sorry, I should, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to take notes so that I don't interrupt you in the future, but I'm just going to mention real quick. I remember being in school and actually having to take typewriting courses. Man, it's crazy. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I also had to take, keyboard typing. I mean, we did it on computers, but like I'm in that bracket where I'm just old enough to remember life before everybody had a computer in their house.
And internet, yeah.
And so dating myself, but anyway. So to the click, click, clack of keyboard of at least it was an electric typewriter keys, I would, ask him repeatedly, Dad, what are you doing? He said, I'm working on my book. And I always thought, like, cool, I like books. I want to write a book. So at some point, I decided I was going to write a book. And the first story I ever wrote, I got about 200 words in before I was like 7. I got about 200 words in and ended with the line, and then she sang a little song about dragons. And that should tell you how many Disney movies I watched as a child. So fast forward a really, really long time to high school and getting out of high school, and I went to college, and I thought, well, I really like writing, but I also really like money, and I've been told repeatedly that, don't go into writing, have another thing to fall back on. So I got my undergrad degree in psychology, which I don't regret at all because it's been fantastic in terms of being able to get into my characters' heads. But then my senior year of college, I up and decided, screw this, I'm going to grad school for creative writing. And so I did. And I got my MFA from Seton Hill University and their writing popular fiction program, which I can't say enough about. It was a great experience, and it taught me, it was like the fast track to a lot of things that I could have learned on my own, but it would have taken a lot longer. But that was kind of the kickoff point, was we had to write a thesis novel in the 2.5 years we were in the program. And pro tip, if you do this, pro tip, do not decide halfway through that you're going to start over, because that is a really, really good way to like get gray hair before you turn 25.
Oh my gosh. Wait, can I ask, so you said it was a 2+ year program. So was it like actually in the midpoint of that program, or that you decided to change?
So let me think. The first 2 or 2.5 semesters, I was working on this and it wasn't working. So what I ended up doing was like, I switched to like what at the time I was thinking of as the second book in the series of like my thesis world, like the trilogy of my thesis world.
Mm-hmm.
So because book 1 was just like all over the place and like wasn't fitting. I couldn't get like more than 50,000 words, and it had to be like at least 70 or 80 or something like that. So, and I was like, and book 2 had like popped into my head fully formed, and I was like, okay, I'll just start over and write.
Oh my gosh,
80,000 words in a 1.5 years while I've still got, other classes and real life. I can do this. And I did it, but I don't recommend it.
Wow.
But it was a big lesson in discipline and, and then all the other little things that come with writing. But that was like the first. I mean, I had written like one other book before that. It was like based on a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and it was like basically just like my characters wandering around, doing the activity of rolling dice without the actual die rolling. So it's like, and then I attacked, and my sword went over 3 spaces on the grid. It was bad. But the thesis novel was the thing that made me realize that, hey, I can do this. And from there it was I tried self-publishing like right after I graduated, and I tried with like some romances about role-playing gamers, and then life happened, and like I took a hiatus for about 8 years, but now I'm back with fantasy and sci-fi, and it's nice to be writing again, because I kind of really missed the creative outlet and everything that goes with that.
Right. So can I ask now, do you write full time, or do you have you have a day job and then you write on the side?
I have a day job, but my day job is kind of, I'm self-employed. So my day job is kind of a mix of editing other people's work, which is one of the fringe benefits of the MFA. I have, story creds that I can apply. And I write study guides for fiction novels for a company called Super Summary. And I really enjoy that because I get paid to read books and then write about them.
Dream job.
Yes, exactly.
Wow, that is amazing. Okay, so you said now you're getting back in, or you're back into writing. I know that you have some things out. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've put out?
Yeah, so in the last couple of years, so a couple of years ago, I had made the mistake, and I knew it was a mistake going in, of publishing like the Grimmfay novel in installments on Patreon, and I had 4 patrons, and it was my friends, but it was the kick in the pants that I needed to have the courage to jump back into the self-publishing arena. So the Patreon is now defunct, though it may come back at some point.
Yeah.
And in the last year, I've polished up the Grimmfay novel, which is coming out in the fall, and back in the spring, I published a novella that takes place about 12 years before the main story, and it's kind of how the characters got to the emotional point where they start in the main novel, and it's something I'm really proud of, because it's the first thing that I've published since I kind of fell off the bandwagon in the mid 2010s, and I'm really
Right.
excited about it.
Yeah, that's great. So can you talk a little bit about what Grimmfay is about without maybe, spoilers or anything?
Oh, I can do that. So, um, Grimmfay, I actually wrote the novel when I moved to Michigan in 2018. Uh, and I'd done so with my boyfriend and his daughter, and he was teaching before we moved. And when we moved, he took, a real full-time, like 40-hour a week job. And I was kind of in this space of figuring out if I wanted to teach or if I wanted to, work for myself full time. Or so I was kind of writing the novel and getting that all straightened out. And I thought, okay, what book have I always wanted to read that I can't find? And Grimmfay, I often get story ideas as like this book or movie meets this book or movie. And Grimmfay popped into my head as The Night Circus meets the Lunar Chronicles. So basically, really like epic fantasy circus meets fairy tales. And so, like with that, I just jumped on it and I ran. And I had this whole idea of I wanted these characters that were based enough on fairy tale characters that if you were paying attention, you could figure it out. But if it wasn't
So
super
on the
obvious,
nose.
right?
Yeah.
So I did that. And I like inserted them into this. I love this world, into this just like place of like brilliant colors and smells and sounds, and what I like to call the circus that brings the colorful circus that brings its own night to match the darkness lurking beneath. So it's this big world of like amazement, but there's this master, and there's big backstory with him that would be spoilers, but he's like the creature in the mirror, because fairy tales, who is just like not a pleasant force.
Right.
And so my whole thing was, all right, so what's the conflict here? And I was like, all right, there were originally 4 women who were like the power 4, and then one of them falls in love and escapes the circus. And Grimmfay is the story of the circus getting back a 4th mistress. And I put A instead of the, because that's where the crux of everything kind of comes together.
Interesting. Wow. I have so many questions that I feel like probably the answers would be spoilery. So I would be excited to read this. I mean, it sounds very interesting. I love the element of the, like you said, kind of mixing circus and dark and I mean, obviously with Fae in the title, you mentioned like fairy tales and stuff. Can you talk to us about like, I don't know, the main character a little bit? Kind of give us some insight into what the main character's like, or what inspired you? Like, what were the pieces that you started with for this story? Like, was it the character? Was it the plot? I know that this is probably several questions all at once, but
no,
I'm just really curious.
I'm laughing because I have 10 point of view characters, and
oh wow,
figuring out which one is the protagonist is like. So let me all right, so one of the first things that came to me after the book meets book and the kind of idea for the world was the 4 mistresses, the power 4, and it's Lady Bianca, Mistress of Blood, Lady Sindel, Mistress of Glass, and Lady Oriana, Mistress of Thorns, and then Lady Zalandra, Mistress of Bonds, and she's the one who got away. So the crux of Grimmfay kind of focuses on Zalandra's fight not to go back, but also dealing with the fact that her daughter has been lured into the circus and is very, very amazed and like wants to be there, and not knowing it is kind of being nudged toward taking Zalandra's place. So I guess it all really focuses around Zalandra's daughter, but it's the daughter's perspective, and then 9 other characters with different views on Grimmfay. Some of them members of the circus, some of them people who are going in to try and get Zalandra's daughter out, but all of them kind of realizing that not everything is what it seems, and that, some battles aren't worth fighting, and some battles need to be fought even if there's no chance you can win.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good. I love that kind of a theme. So,
Thanks.
can I ask you? Okay. I was thinking about how to kind of break down my question so it's not all just with one big giant lump question. But so let's go back to the circus and the dark and the fairy kind of setting. What
Okay.
is there like one particular aspect of that that you identify with the most that you kind of really wanted to dig into? Was it the circus? Was it the fairy? Was it the dark aspect? Like, which of it do you think you connect with the most that you really wanted to pull out?
I think what I really wanted to do was to take the three mistresses that are still at the circus and take the links to the characters that they represent and make sure that those stories were kind of intertwined in the world without being too obvious, but also with like being able to show off what the circus is all about. So, example, Oriana, the Mistress of Thorns, is based on Sleeping Beauty or Aurora, from the
Oh,
Disney version.
okay.
And so her color is jade green, and so everything surrounding her, like anything that's jade in the circus, and that includes like the very grass itself,
Wow.
is associated with her. And she's got this outdoor performance before like the big grand performance at the end where all the power is revealed. But her outdoor performance is like she's kind of very still and very like as these fairies, like as the three fairy guardians she has in the Disney movie almost, are like
Okay.
floating around and like shooting magic, and like there's just jade everywhere, and like it just builds into. I like to think that the colors and the magic all build into Grimmfay so that the magic is feeding the fairy tale adaptation, and that the
Mm-hmm.
fairy tale adaptation is feeding Grimmfay itself.
Okay. So yeah, it sounds like you connected more with the circus aspect of the setting. Do you have any experiences with the circus? Do you remember any like childhood memories with circuses that I was just
Uh,
curious?
no, the only thing I could think of in this, I don't even know if this counts, is like this little tiny like indoor circus came to my elementary school, and I just remember sitting in the audience with my dad and looking up at the trapeze artist and being like, I would die if I was up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not the most
So,
coordinated either.
oh, I know, not at all. But I've always kind of been fascinated with like circus performers, and like the whole like there's so much skill with a
Yeah.
lot of those. And I wanted to kind of, I'm also like, I have a slight, like I did a lot of community theater, and I did theater all through high school and college. So I have that kind of performing arts background. And I kind of wanted to dig into like what you could do with performance in terms of building a world, and how like the performances influence everything that goes on. And the circus just seemed like a really nice place to be able to do all that. And also, like, some of my favorite fantasy worlds to read about are the ones where you feel like you're not seeing the whole thing, but that the whole thing it's there. You just don't, like, there's a tent over there, but we're not going that way, but it's still
Right.
there.
And so there's
Um,
that
and that's
question kind of lingering.
and
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to do with Grimmfay. I wanted to make this place that, there's all of this going on. There's these 10 point of view characters who are all in different places at the same time, but there's still more that you just don't see, but it's there.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So let's dig into that a little bit, because I mean that's really the point of our conversation today, is talking about the world building that you put into your story. Um, so can you talk about any particular process of yours that you went through in world building? Did you start with, it sounds like maybe you started with the characters, but that's an assumption. Did you start with the characters? Did you start with or did you start with the settings, and then how did you build off of that to kind of create everything?
So I guess it's kind of weird because it kind of just popped into my head. Like I had these characters, I knew
Just
I
kind of
wanted this
came to you.
circus. Yeah, but so I think that I built Grimmfay kind of as I went. So I would get to a point in the story where like a character needed to do something, but they would do that thing at this performance, and so I'd be like, oh, I need a performance here, so I'll put foxes that are jumping around and forming pyramids, or I'll put um like I used like the Three Little Pigs story. So there's this performance where one of my Oriana is showing her love interest like the circus, and they're getting close, and she wants to show him something that you'd never see out in the real world. So she takes him to this performance of these three pigs who are juggling sticks and bricks and straw.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so I just kind of tried to insert performances that were relevant to what was going on, that would actually help the characters work through whatever they needed to work through in that scene. And in that way, Grimmfay just kind of grew as I was going. And I tried not to put a lid on what would be included. One of the things that snuck up on me, and it's one of my favorite places, is called the Enchanted Forest. And it's this dark green tent that opens up into this literal forest that is kind of part of Grimmfay and not part of Grimmfay at the same time. And like within the forest, there's animals that don't talk necessarily, but they just know things. And there's this seeing pool that shows you what you most need to see, and it's all just links back to how much can you do with this world. So it was just, if I needed something, I was like, well, the sky's the limit, so there it is.
Okay, so let me ask you then. It sounds like, when it comes to writing, they say you're either a plotter or a pantser, right? Or
Right.
I'm trying to think of what are some of the other terms. Discovery writer, plotter. Did I already say plotter? Yeah, no,
Is
there
it
was
fun?
another
I think there's like a planter, which is something in the middle.
something in the middle. So where would you
Yeah,
put yourself on that line? It sounds like maybe you're kind of a bit of a pantser.
I am definitely a pantser. I don't plot anything. In fact, I I get to a point in the story with that I won't spoil, with Zelander's daughter, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, that happened? Wow, cool. That changes everything.
Don't you love
Uh,
when that happens? I would probably put myself a little bit, I'm you know what? Yeah, I will get to that. But yeah, I started out thinking I was a plotter because I am a type A personality. I love having things on the calendar. Everything has to be super structured. I love bullet points. And so I started out as a plotter. And through the process of many years of struggling to write, I figured out that I am not a plotter. Like once I've figured out the story, I am bored with it and I have to move on. So I
oh
had
no.
to switch my brain to becoming a pantser and
Yeah.
find writing to be much more enjoyable because it's almost like whatever happens is as much a surprise to me as it is to the
Right.
reader.
Right. And that works both ways, because on the one hand it's like, okay, now I have to go back and make sure that I foreshadow this properly.
Right, that's
But
what I was going to ask you because that is the downside of being a pantser. So have you ever gotten yourself to a point, and this is important, I think this is great. I'm glad we got onto this subject because especially for new writers, like I said, this took me years to figure out. So I hope that by us talking about it, we hopefully help someone else maybe figure it out sooner. But
right.
let's say so you're pantsing and you've kind of written yourself into a corner. How do you handle that?
So it took me a long time to figure this out, but I've gotten to a point where I don't believe in writing yourself into a corner, because no matter where you write yourself, there is a way to go. It may not be the way that you initially planned, but sometimes those are the best unexpected, turns, the ones that you didn't see coming.
Right.
So, and I see this all the time. I'm in a lot of writing groups on, Facebook and elsewhere, and it's like, oh my God, I got to this point, I don't know what to do, and it was supposed to do this, and I'm like, all right, I'm supposed to throw that away.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because it's what the thing that I feel like a lot of people forget is it's your story. You can
Mm-hmm.
do literally anything you want. I mean, even if it's set in the real world, you can find a direction. It may not be where you started. It may not be where you thought you were going to end up, but I don't think there's any such thing as writing yourself into a corner, because you can change directions mid-story and then always go back and rework the details so they match up. And I found myself having to do that quite a bit, because as I said, I would get to a point and be like, oh, that's new.
Yep.
But it all worked out. Like, I'm really proud of my 100,000 word behemoth, and I think it came together well.
Yeah, I think that's something that, as a new writer, I know I struggled with. Once I started becoming a pantser and I wrote myself into a corner, it's almost like this is another lesson that writers need to learn is, what do they call it? Like killing your darlings, or cutting things out. Just because you took the time and effort to write it, it's so hard sometimes to like throw that away and start afresh in a different direction. But it really is, I think, especially for folks who are pantsers, that's it's the downside, and that's how you got to learn, I think, to adjust is, well, now I need to scrap these 500 words that took me, all day to write, and take it in another direction. And it's a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah. And the other thing is, you were saying about you took all this time to write it. And I've found that most of the time, not all the time, but if I'm slogging to try and get words down, I find that those are the words I most often end up cutting, because they weren't working to begin with, and I knew that.
Yeah,
but
somewhere in your brain,
write
it.
Something down, like I need words, and so I tend to take big breaks, like between. Sometimes, like if I'm stuck, I don't feel bad about this anymore. I walk away from the story until I figure it out, and then I go back to it, because if I just start trying to force stuff out, I know it's not going to end well.
Right.
That's the corner that I write myself into, is the like trying to force my way through it, and it's like, well, just step back, chill. I mean, if you're on a hardcore schedule, or you're writing to market, that's a totally different thing. But that's not my thing, so I just do what works for me.
I'm just going to apologize to our listeners in case they heard that. I apparently have someone cutting trees down near my window. So I don't know if you could hear that, but there was just a chainsaw happening while you were talking, and I was hoping it wasn't picking up too hard. So
I didn't hear anything. So
oh, perfect. Okay, hopefully my mic just decided to filter that out. All right. So let's see. I wanted to ask you. So you were talking about the women in your book, and that they use magic. It sounds like they use magic in their shows. In your world, is magic kind of an everyday thing? Everyone is aware of it, everyone uses it, or is it like only certain folks, only the circus?
It's really so I'm humming, because it's not an everyday thing necessarily, and it's not necessarily just the circus, but that's getting into like
it's
territory
spoilery area.
Spoilery things that I haven't completely worked out yet, even myself. But for our purposes, there is magic. There is magic. It exists outside the circus, but it's not a super common thing. Like I have a couple of characters in the book who are not of the circus, who have these, I guess, gifts they call them, but they're things that they had to train and like learn how to use, and like go off and do that I don't get into the details in this book, but most of the magic is definitely within the circus, and the powers that the women of the circus use, and everybody in the circus really uses, are kind of controlled by the master. Like he distributes stuff. And he's kind of like this mysterious dude in the background who does not twirl his mustache, but if he did, it would be a whole other story. Yeah, he's kind of the anchor for the whole thing. And so Sindel, her element is glass, and she's based loosely on Cinderella, and so and I try to thematically point to that with like high-heeled dancing slippers and yada yada, but her color is azure, so her glass is blue, and like everything she does is blue, and she can manipulate glass, and she uses it in ways that like just I don't even know how to describe it. Like, it's not like she just wanders around the circus and does glass things, but like she has the ability to use it for pretty much whatever she wants to use it for.
Right.
If that
Now,
makes sense.
yeah, can I ask, okay, if this is digging too deep into the magic system, please let me know. I just know magic
So,
systems are a big deal for writers, especially when they're putting it in their book. They, it's almost like, I think the most conversation I see around it is that it's hard to come up with an original magic system, or whether or not you write it out as like a soft, what they call like soft magic versus hard
yeah.
magic, which I'm sure you're familiar with the terms. Um,
Mhm.
it sounds like there's a lot of color involved with your magic. Is that actually part of the magic, or is it just kind of a thematic, kind of to help differentiate in people's minds, the different women with their magic?
I think it's the latter more so. I just wanted like, well, because so Bianca is, my Snow White equivalent, and I wanted a red color because of the whole apple thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of the thematic working in, but she's, mistress of blood. So there's like this whole, she kind of has more of an awareness of people, like based on how the blood in their body is moving. Like she can tell if someone's excited or someone's scared, or she can like use her ability to like soothe, you know, blood that's moving too fast, or it doesn't come up. But
Wow.
I would imagine that she could like work with actual wounds, though it doesn't come up. But yeah, so there's kind of a level of it's a lot of thematic, to give the circus some color and to give the characters like their own personalities. But the other thing that I like to really do is I'm really big on writing in third person deep point of view, and so I try to make as much of my character's view on the world about whatever specific stuff goes on with them.
Mm-hmm.
So for Bianca, it's like she sees the world in turn in red. She makes metaphors about blood and poison and fruit and things that just kind of intertwine with the magic, intertwine with her fairy tale counterpart, and I like to try to use that to build up the character and the world as the character sees it.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. I mean, I think that sounds like you've done a lot of world building with these characters, really thought about their perspectives, like you said, the third person kind of deep perspective. And I think it's really great. I love the idea that you took like, what's essentially like blood magic, or you're tying it in with blood, but it feels like you've taken it in kind of a fresh direction with this whole like she can maybe calm people down. Is that what you said? Kind of just like slowing their blood rate, or how did you
Yeah.
describe that?
So there's a scene that kind of later on where Cinderella's stepsisters are also kind of part of the circus, and I went back to the original where they cut off their toes and heels and whatnot to try and fit into the glass slipper,
Oh, wow.
and so there's this kind of like wrongness that the master they did something to tick off the master, so he kind of punishes them by like having their blood kind of unnaturally try to keep healing these things even though they can't be healed. And
Wow.
Bianca kind of can like soothe that, but only to a certain degree, because only as far as the master will allow it.
Yeah.
So it's yeah. So that scene, that was another moment where I was like, oh, that happened. But it felt really genuine, and it felt like it really worked for Bianca and for the relationship between Bianca and Sindel. And it was just like, wow, this is really it's amazing when your own story is like, wow, that's really cool. Did I come up with that?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love when that happens.
Right?
Um, so it sounds like then, to go back to the soft magic and the hard magic, that in your world this is kind of like a soft magic system.
Yeah, I would say so, because there's no like hard and fast rules, but there's also, I mean, there's definitely limits, but those limits are rather undefined.
Right. Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to circle back to, you kind of casually threw in there, and I don't know that we talked about this when we talked before the interview, that you have some experience with D&D. Have
Oh,
you played? Have you ran a game?
I have not run any games. I have that was kind of the thing that got me. So the other thing, aside from sitting there, listening to the typewriter keys, my dad used to play, like, there'd be like this Friday night, like some of my older cousins would come over, and they'd all hunker down in the basement with the character sheets and whatnot. I'd go down there and be like, ooh, paper, but I had no idea what was going on. I was like 4. But when I got a little bit older, he and I started this like campaign with like these 5 characters that we created, and it was kind of like just something we do in free time, when I was a kid. But it was fun. And then I played a little more seriously in college. We had a campaign that ran for a few months, and I got to play this awesome, like, longbow wielding assassin character whom I loved.
Wow.
Because I could like stand 30 squares away from where the danger was and just pick things off.
So let me ask, so it sounds like you've played, you've not DM'd.
Right.
Did you write any kind of backstory for your character? I'm just curious.
For my D&D?
Yeah, your D&D character.
Actually, interestingly enough, I did kind of write a backstory. It was a short story. It was like a couple thousand words, but that story, but that's the story that got me into Seton Hill. We had to like write like a 2,000 word something or other and send it with our application, and that was the story I wrote and sent, and it got me into grad school.
Oh, wow. Okay, folks, that's a tip for you. If you want to get into college, write D&D stuff.
Write D&D.
That's awesome. That is so cool.
I completely forgot about that, so you asked me.
That is amazing. I just kind of figured, I mean, here's my experience, because I've got one foot in writing, fiction writing, and one foot in tabletop role playing. And whenever I start a new campaign, I tend to overwhelm my DMs with backstory, like 5 pages, and then I have to tell myself I have to tame it down. So I just was curious if you had written a backstory. That's funny. It got you into college.
It did. Dungeons and Dragons got me into grad school. Like what?
See, I mean, how can anybody think D&D is wrong, right? Okay. Oh, that's great. All right, so let's talk about, I mean, we kind of talked a little bit about your world building process and your writing. You're a pantser. Do you have any particular resources or tools that you use to kind of help keep it all organized? I think as a pantser, like, do you write scenes out of order, like because a scene comes to you in that moment, or do you write everything chronologically?
I don't typically do well with writing things out of order. I did that once because I had like the story where I had the beginning and the ending, and I was trying to keep it to a certain word count, and I wanted to kind of see where that left me before I wrote the middle. But in general, I don't write out of order well. So like I said earlier, like even if I have to take, a couple of weeks off and like figure out where I'm at, I try to write chronologically, story-wise, because it just ends up working better. Mm-hmm. In terms of tools, I mean, I am the low tech of low tech people. Like, I have a Word document with like notes for like anything I figured out for upcoming chapters, and it's like, this happens, this might happen, figure out if this can happen.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I don't have all the shiny, whatever the kids are using for their shiny writer tools. I don't.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, some people I know, they can just keep it all in their heads, like all of it. Yeah. And it's so much information. I don't understand how they can keep it all straight, but some people are blessed like that. So
I mean, that's kind of mostly what I do. Is I think I store stuff in my, and like I'll write down like basic notes just in case something goes south, and I'm like, what was that amazing thing that I thought of at 3 a.m? But for the most part, it's just, I take notes. I kind of like, it comes into my head, and I let it sit and percolate, because ideas tend to move around the more that they sit there, and I come up with better stuff as a result.
Yeah.
Most of the time. So just kidding.
Do you have any authors that you have either fashioned your writing after, or that were kind of the authors that inspired you to kind of start writing?
So I got into the first book that made me think, hey, I could do this writing thing was actually an anthology by Patricia C. Reed that I read, gosh, years and years ago. And it was like, it was a bunch of like, fantasy stories for like for kids. And I would tell you what they were, what it was called if I could remember, but it's not coming to me. But that was like the first thing, because at the end of the book, I remember she had like her thoughts on like how each story came together, and I thought that was the most fascinating thing I'd ever read, when I was like 6. And I was like, wow, there's like this is a thing, like people do this, they like come up with ideas and they write stories based on them, and I wanted to do that.
So that was your first inkling of like,
yep.
This is possible for me. Okay.
Yeah, this is a real person who like does this. They sit down and they write stories. I'm a real person. I could do that.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up after the interview, and then maybe we can post like a link to it in the below stuff.
I wish I could remember the title. Anyway, after that, I read the first like book I can remember reading is, I think it was called The Secret of the Ruby Ring, and I don't remember the author, but it was like a historical time travel fantasy about this girl who like, she was like kind of stuck up and selfish, and she's like, I want to live in a bigger house, and she like made this wish and ended up going back in time and being a servant in this like huge mansion. Like, be careful what you wish for, basically.
Right.
But that got me into like, that was like my catalyst into science fiction and fantasy. And I mean, from there I went, A Wrinkle in Time, and
oh yeah,
so many other books. And then at some point, like at a very young age that I'm sure my parents are still like, why did we do this? I picked up Terry Goodkind like at 10, 12 or something, and let me tell you, like, Terry Goodkind is not something any adjusted 12-year-old should be reading. Like, that is scary stuff.
What can you mention? Which stories in particular?
Oh, just the entire like Wizard's First Rule sort of truth.
Okay, series. Yeah, I was thinking when you said Terry Goodkind, that had to be it.
Have you read them?
I have.
Like, I don't know, I don't want to like spoil anything or like, but I got to that part like at the end of the first book where like somebody did something to another character, and I was just like, I was 12 and I was like, what
devastated?
Yeah, I just did not know, like, the world no longer made sense.
Yeah.
But yes, but despite that, like, I for whatever reason like just kept reading the series. I guess I'm a masochist or something. But like, I got to Temple of the Winds, and there was this like god awful like torture scene with mice, and I swear to God, like, I didn't sleep.
Oh. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to reread them. It's been so long.
I've never reread them, but like that scene just like sticks in my head as like thing that gave me childhood nightmares. So. Wow.
Oh man. Okay, so Terry Goodkind.
I think that and it's weird because like I don't consider myself really a dark fantasy writer. Like, Grimmfay has some darkness in it, but it's more of like the mysterious what's going on kind of darkness, as opposed to the like body parts flying around, like horrible things happening to people.
Yeah.
Darkness. But I think that I may have gotten, I mean, the early stuff that I wrote like when I was in my younger teens is like, even if it's like set in the real world, it is very like you can see the Goodkind, like if I go back, I can see the Goodkind influence of like all my characters being like, everything's going so well, and then somebody died.
Okay. So. I love that. Talking about Terry Goodkind, you were kind of talking about the darkness, and I was curious with your, and gory stuff and blood. You have your one character that kind of does like blood magic, or kind of has influence over blood. So can you talk a little bit about how do you get very gory with that, or how much blood are you describing blood, like how, just so that anybody who's interested might not get shocked and be like, there's being feet getting cut off.
Yeah, no, there's no body parts were harmed in the making of this book. No, there's no gore. I mean, I would, if I was gonna give this like a movie rating, I would go like PG-13.
Okay.
The 13 is just because like some of my characters come from rather like unfortunate pasts, and there's some like memory almost flashback type scenes. But there's no gore. She can like manipulate blood like out in the open, but it's more of like an adornment or a performance piece than anything else. And it's not. I don't think it's gory or gross, and I get icky about that kind of stuff fairly easily.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, because like I said, I just think this blood magic sounds super interesting, and I'm sure that's just one of these women. And you said you have like 3-4 total, so I am very interested in how you've kind of weaved the theme into their magic. It sounds very like original and unique, so I'm curious about it. So let's see. I'm trying to think. Is there anything else before we move on from world building? I wanted to ask, is there anything in particular with your story that you're like particularly proud of, or that you really want to speak to as far as the world building element? If you don't have, or I can, no problem. I can fill the silence, or I can, I do that really well.
we should just have like 2 minutes of silence just to see how many people get uncomfortable. I mean, just like the circus itself, but I think that I've covered
a lot of it.
Most of it. Yeah. I mean, I can't really think of anything else that like jumps out at me that isn't like, oh, just read it and find out. Yeah. It's like, just go. It's awesome circus. You want to go.
Yeah. All right. Well, so let's talk about then, you've got a published book, right? Or at least one, if not more.
Yeah. I have a few. Some of them they're from years ago. They're like tabletop gamer romance novels that I need to like do some serious work with and like re-upload. But they're still kicking around out there.
Yeah, you really should. I mean, the market's kind of hot right now for tabletop role-playing stuff. So.
I know. It's bad timing. I need to finish up Grimmfay, the proof. I got it back to the proof reader. I need to get it to the formatter. Like.
Yeah. No, I get you. It's like too many things that you just got to find the type. Like, which one's your priority right now? So then, with all this experience that you have had and that you have on hand, what would you say, like, if you could kind of give some new authors some perspective or tips or, things you wish you knew going into the process, what would you tell them?
Well, I think the first thing is those people that look like overnight successes that like put out one book and like, oh my God, they're all of a sudden like super popular, that they're not. You're seeing like the culmination of everything that you didn't see. There's a lot of work that goes into, I mean, some people might hit it lucky and just happen to strike the market at the right time so that their book explodes. But for the most part, the people like that you see are, they've been networking like crazy. They've been setting things up in the background. They've been, doing a lot so that when they launched that first book, they were in a really good position to like, get the algorithms behind it, get an audience, like they knew who they were marketing to. So don't expect that. Don't expect that you're going to like launch into the, scene and be,
the next bestseller kind of thing.
Yeah, out of the blue. I mean, it could happen. I'm not saying it won't or that it can't, but don't go in with that expectation, because I kind of went in with that expectation when I published those romances years ago, and like I was like, oh, I don't need to market, I don't need to have a newsletter, I'm just going to be amazing because I'm doing something different. And like, spoiler alert, that did not happen.
Right.
I think that's part of the reason that I ended up on that really long hiatus before I published something else, was that I was like, I'm a failure. And it's like, you're not a failure, you just like didn't do a bunch of stuff that you should have done before or while you're in process. So I think that's really key, to like not throw in the towel after 3 months or 6 months or a year or even 2 years. I mean, unless like, life throws you things and you just need to, it's a long game. It's not a sprint.
Right. So yeah, manage the expectations, but then
Yes.
and now you took that hiatus when like your reality didn't meet your expectation, but uh was there anything that you had to kind of like work through as a writer to get back to writing? I mean, is there any way that you think you could have like expedited your process of, moving forward after that like disappointment or
So I I kind of, when I took the hiatus from publishing, really, I kept kind of writing, just not really, like, I transitioned kind of more to like short stories and fantasy stuff for a couple of years, and I was still, doing some novel writing. But I think the thing that really, the big hiatus I took from writing, from all of it came, I got I got a rejection from a publisher, and I just, like, it hit me. It was like a Friday afternoon, and it hit me really, really hard. And I was
right
like,
before your weekend?
yeah, and I was like, I'm so tired of not being good enough for anybody, and like, I just threw up my hands, and I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm
Yeah.
done writing. I'm gonna edit other people's stuff, and I'm gonna find something else to do with my time, and that's it. And that was 2018 or 2019. I don't remember now, but that was like kind of when I just stopped. Because I mean, I wrote Grimmfay in 2018, so I was still, and I had, like, I wanted to do something with it. I had pitched it to a few agents after I finished, and that didn't go anywhere. And I was like, oh, let me keep chugging, And but when I got that one, and the rejection was not on Grimmfay, it was something else. But it was just like, I'm done. Like, nobody wants me. I'm quitting. And I try not to have regrets, because like there's nothing you can go do to go back and change things. But I kind of really, I regret letting that hit me so hard, and I regret not trying to work through those emotions
Yeah.
sooner.
Do you feel like
Because
you maybe lost some momentum because of that?
yeah, I totally did. I mean, I also, like, wanted to, like, focus on, getting financially settled. Like, the
Mm-hmm.
boyfriend had the job, and I was kind of feeling a little like I wasn't pulling my weight necessarily. But like, and I also, like, writing full time for me. I don't know that I could do it full time, because I do my best work on anything when I have multiple types of projects to work
Right.
on, so I can kind of like give different parts of my brain a rest. And so I switched over to like the study guide writing and the editing, and that was great for a few years. But it was really like editing other people's books and seeing them like have the courage to like put them out there was like, wow, I really miss writing my own stuff. And that was, you get those defining moments from places you don't really expect to get them from
Right.
sometimes. And it was like, I can do both. I can help, other authors, because I've got, the background to, in story structure and world building and all that. And I can also like write the stuff that I want to write, that's been sitting on my hard drive and languishing. So,
Yeah, sitting inside of you.
yeah, that too. That
So
too.
So, uh, so now that you kind of have that perspective, now that you've come through and you're on the other side of that, do you employ measures to kind of stay positive if you think that you're in a position where like, rejection is incoming or, you're waiting for feedback on something that you've submitted? Do you use methods to like stay positive, or is it more that you're on the other side of this so you know that that could be a possibility and you're just kind of like prepared for it?
I think that for the most part, I feel like I recognize that, it's a slow climb, not a sprint. And I recognize that, not everything that I write is going to be for every reader, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I mean, I definitely get, I have days, sometimes multiple days in a row, where I feel like I'm not doing everything I could be doing. I don't feel like I'm, building up a backlist or a catalog fast enough to, really give myself a competitive edge in the market. I get, because it's like I do have a quote unquote day job, and I do need to, focus on that, because, I've got deadlines and I've got people counting on
Right.
me. And So, writing right now is kind of a like weekends, or if I have like some free time when I finish all the paid work stuff I wanted to get done for the day. And that kind of leaves me like, sometimes that leaves me feeling like I'm just not, able to get where I want to get fast enough. And I have to, and the worst thing about, with that is like, going on social media and seeing the people being like, oh, I finished writing my 8th book this year. And
right.
I'm just like, oh, good for you.
You're like, you jerk. Not jerk, but yeah.
No. But it's like, I'm thrilled for you. Like, and I feel like I've crossed a point where I no longer get jealous of that. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. And then it's more of like, why can't I do that?
Right. But I think it's important. I mean, like you said, I think the majority, or I think the real thing that happens to the majority of writers is what you experience, which is, having to learn about, rejection when you're submitting, how to push through that. It's all the pitfalls of writing that no one really talks about sometimes, because why would you want to talk about that, right? That's the bad stuff. But that's what people, I think, need to hear. So.
Oh, no, I agree. I agree with you completely. Because, like, I mean, and the other thing is, but, like, you can also, it's like it's kind of everybody has to kind of find it in their own time. I mean, you can hear other people talk about rejection. You can, be comforted by people when you've experienced rejection, but there's nothing that's really going to get you through it other than just sitting down and taking a good hard look at those feelings and figuring out what you need to do for yourself to work through them, how you need to approach writing so that you're doing it for you and not for anybody else.
Right. Yes. Or necessarily to do it to make millions, because
right. Yeah. I mean, much as we all would love to do that. I'll actually be content with a few 100,000 personally, but
right. I mean, just something a little realistic. I'm not asking for millions. I just
I mean, I'm also the kind of person who's like, I don't want to do any serious like focus on ads or like paid marketing until I have more books built up and, a bigger, catalog of work to choose from, because I feel like putting all that effort in for a novella is like,
right.
And some old books that I need to rework anyway is kind of like, why? But, but even so, like, just, I don't feel like you need to, I completely lost where I was going with that.
Well, you mentioned something about kind of like marketing yourself and you not waiting until you have a larger catalog of stuff. You mentioned your prequel.
Yeah, and it was something before that, but I think what I was trying to get to is like, it'll come to me. Let's move on.
Well, so I do admire, it sounds like you have a lot of patience, because you understand that, like, if you have like one thing out there, people might be like, well, is this worth it? But if you have more selection, it kind of shows that you've put in your dues, that you have, the work, the patience to put out this work. I don't know, but that's how I'm seeing it.
Well, I think it's a like, if you have one book, people don't necessarily know, is there going to be more? Like, if I love this, is there going to be something else?
Right.
Or am I just, oh, that was nice, I can find another author now.
Right.
But like, I think that having multiple, I mean, even if it's in, totally different, because like I said, I've got an old romance series, I've got the Grimmfay fantasy, and then, I've got another series in the works that's like superheroes with dragons, and it's like, they're all very, very different. They might all have very, very different like readerships, but like, I'm not the kind of person who needs to like, I've tried the pen name for one genre and a different name for another genre, and that is just way too many names.
Yeah.
For me
to track.
Oh God, I can barely do me on social media. Like, I can't even do me and author me. Like,
it's funny though. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna just say, for better or for worse, it's all one name, no matter what I do. So, like, if you don't like one series, just hop onto a different one. Yep. Because that's all I got.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking, mentioning the, putting more out in your series. I feel like I don't know if that's everybody else's experience, but for me, like my approach in Netflix is like, oh, this looks like a very interesting show. Oh, there's only one season. Do I want to put the effort to watch the season if it's not going to come back? So yeah, I tend to wait until I see at least like 2 or 3 seasons, and then I go, oh, okay, this is a show that people actually enjoy enough that they're making more, you know? So I think that
Yeah.
might be the same tactic
Right.
there.
Right. And then you find a series that you really, really like, and you watch it and you're like, oh, that was great, and then they don't renew it and you get
Right.
really upset.
You get
That's
really
happened
upset.
twice now on Amazon Prime, and I am very mad at them.
Oh, you hear that, Amazon Prime? Mary's coming for you.
I don't think they care.
Oh my gosh.
Believe it or
So,
not, I don't think they care.
okay, so let's talk. You just brought up a few of the things that you put out there. Do
Yeah.
you want to kind of tell our viewers where they can find it or what you have out in the world that they can check out?
Sure. And I thought about this coming in. Like, I don't necessarily have like a great centrally. I have a website with a very odd. It's not my name, so I don't even know. Is that link? Is that visible, or is my head blocking it? Like, what's the deal with
The kitten kabukel, is that
the
what it?
buckle? Yeah.
Buckle? Yeah. Yes. So
Oh,
that
cool.
link is on the bottom of our screen. It kind of cycles through. So
Okay.
it's not on at the moment, but it
Right.
cycles through. Yes.
So that would be the place. Like, that's kind of where I exist on the internet. So if you've heard of the phrase "the whole kit and caboodle," I basically took that and swapped out the D for a K. So it's the whole kit and cabookle. KITNKABOOKLE.com. And that's like I'm the whole kit and cabookle of literature. I do it all. I edit, I blog, I write, I review books. I'm kind of everywhere. But there's that website is kind of my website is kind of divided into editor me and author me, and everything author me is going to be under MT DeSantis, so my initials, and then my last name. And you can find me as MT DeSantis on Amazon. I'm working on going wide to other retailers. That is one of my big goals for the next year. I'd like to even do it before Grimmfay comes out in the fall, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But I'm hoping to be, Kobo, Barnes and Noble, Apple, Google. I'm hoping to be all over the place by sometime in 2024. But for now, and also Goodreads, MT DeSantis, I'm over there. So if you follow me on one of those places, or if you subscribe to my blog, or if you use that shiny little link that pops up at the bottom, that goes to my author newsletter. And joining my author newsletter comes with a nice introduction to Grimmfay. There's a short story about how the big four women of the circus, their first performance and how they met.
Oh, that's so
And
cool.
it was one of those things where I was like, I need a reader magnet. I'm gonna write something. And I had no clue what I was gonna write, and then it just dawned on me. It's like, hey, these characters, like, they have a history. So I wrote that, and that is exclusively for newsletter subscribers. So if you want to kind of check out the circus before it comes to town, that would be the place to do it.
Oh, I love that. I love you just worked in that little oh, that was perfect. Also, FYI, for those of you that are watching this when it gets on YouTube, I will include the link to where you can find the Grimmfay on Amazon. It's currently on pre-order, right?
Yeah, it's pre-order. It comes out October 10th. And if you pre-order, you get the special 99-cent pre-order price. And after release day, it goes up to a price that I would tell you if I had figured out exactly what it is yet. But it's more than
but it's
99
going to be
cents.
more than 99 cents, so we know that. I'm just curious. So is it like you set that price or Amazon sets that price? And then
I set the price.
Is it like a $10 range, like $5, $25? Like, what's the range that you think it would probably fall in?
I've been thinking at this point, it's probably going to full price when it releases. It'll probably either be like it'll be somewhere between like $4.99 or $6.99, I think, in that range.
Okay, much more
So
affordable than $25.
yeah, no, it's not gonna be. I don't want to get on my soapbox, but like when I see ebooks that are like $9.99 and up, I'm like, it's a digital file. Like, what
Yeah,
are you
like
doing?
you didn't even have to put out any like printing costs or right? I don't know. I haven't self-published on Amazon, so I'm not entirely certain about all the costs that's involved. But that is another topic. If we ever want to do this again, we should talk about like self-publishing and what's involved.
Yeah, it's a doozy of a process, and I mean, I've only scratched the surface of one platform, so things are going to get interesting.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you have a really now, I don't know if you do voices, but I'm going to tell you, you have a really great voice. And so
Uh,
if you plan on like reading your book for like an audiobook, I don't know the process for that, but I think you could pull it off. You have a really good soothing voice.
it is amazing that you say that because when I released the prequel back in April, the one of the things that I did for my newsletter subscribers, like on release day to celebrate, was I recorded the first chapter of Grimmfay. Like I just did like it's not like up to audiobook standards at all, but like I just recorded it and like plopped it up and like sent it to people to listen to. And I had a few people email me being like, "Wow, you're really good at this. You should do your own audiobooks."
Right. I mean, that is a whole nother market for fiction writers. I know that some
Yeah.
can do that. Yeah, they'll read
I would love
audiobooks.
to. I'm not using it for this, but I bought a like beginner like voiceover work microphone a year ago, and I had actually done like a little. I did this like unofficial like Star Wars game thing where I voiced like the defense, like the group, like collectively like the defense females of some planet in the Star Wars universe that I can't remember the name of. But that was like so much fun. I was like, I should get into more of this, but I just haven't had the time.
Right. Yeah. I
But
mean, there's
I'd
so
love
much
to.
involved, especially all you new authors out there. There is so much more
Oh my god.
involved with writing than you think. You're looking at the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
It's like once you finish that story, then you see everything that's below the water surface.
Oh, I mean, writing. I never ever, when I was like younger, or thought I would say this, but like writing the book is the easy part, literally.
Yeah.
Because after that it's revising and editing and finding and getting a book cover and marketing and like how many formats can I put this thing in? And
Right.
just like,
So many hats you got to put on. And it's like,
yeah.
I think that is probably the hardest part too. I give a lot of respect to self-publishers because I mean, I feel like as a writer, you're putting the creative hat. That's why you become a writer, because you want to be creative. And then
Yeah.
doing all the other, like the administrative work afterwards is like such a slog. Like I wouldn't want to do that. That's so hard. And so the folks who actually go through that process, I just have a lot of respect for.
Can I just tell you, like I'm self-employed, and like every quarter when like it comes up for like estimated tax payments, like I'm like, this is better than being poked in the eye with a sharp stick, but not by much.
Right. Yeah. It's just a different mindset that's just we're not built for, I think. We like to just let our minds flow free.
Yeah,
So,
which is, imposes chaos on the people you live with because they're trying to talk to you and you're like plotting out this like dragon battle in your head and like not paying attention to anything that they're saying.
right. I have actually had that happen like mid-conversation with my husband. I'm like, "Oh, wait, my mind was elsewhere. I'm sorry."
I do this all the time. My poor boyfriend, he's talking to me. He's like, "Are you listening?" And I'm like, "No. What are you talking? Do I know you?"
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's world builder's disease, but it's like creative's disease. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's there's no cure, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, snap your fingers and make sure we're looking at you in the eye.
Right.
So, all right. Well, it was such a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for being my guinea pig. I mean, I wouldn't call you that, but I appreciate it so much. I had a lot of fun. I hope that people find this helpful as I continue, this process of interviewing folks who have been through kind of the hard parts of writing, and I want to help people. So I really appreciate I can speak English now that we're at the end of the show. I really appreciate having you on the show.
Well, I appreciate you letting me be here. This was a lot of fun, and I haven't got a chance to really like geek out and talk about my story like to people who aren't, living with me and forced to listen. So
Well, yeah, this is the
it's
place to geek out. And I hope everyone, if you have watched this, that you are geeking out too and that you go to Amazon and get your pre order for Grimmfay because I am going to. It sounds really interesting. It sounds unique, like you said. I don't think I've ever heard or seen anything that includes, circus and fairy and it's dark. I think it's going to be really fantastic.
I'm excited. So that's it. October 10th is like miles away, and also like
So
tomorrow.
close, right? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to be looking out for it on October 10th and see how, give you guys leave a review. This, yes, folks. Also, if you go and get the pre-order, make sure you leave your review when you're done reading it.
Thank you.
No problem, right? That's like the final piece, if you love it, you got to show people that you love it, and the best I can still speak English. The best metric for that is, to do the like, subscribe, share, or review and tell your friends and things
Yes,
like
tell
that.
all your friends.
Yes, especially, yeah, I have a lot of followers who are tabletop role-playing game, fanatics. So anything
Yeah.
fantasy like that, they're going to flock to. So, and
Awesome.
usually
Talk
your
away.
friends like similar things. So share with your friends. All right, I'm going to stop beating that horse to be more dead than it was.
One more time.
Yeah. Anyway, I really appreciate having you on the show. I do you have anything that you want to end with? Any particular thing you want to say?
Good question.
Sorry to catch you off guard.
You asked that. I was like, I should have taken some time to come up with something really witty, but like I didn't.
Oh no, that's fine. I mean, I just have a little outro that is very short and simple, which is just keep building and keep creating.
Yeah, there you go. Do that, and this was great. So
Right.
go forth and create, Defy.
Thank you so much. Pre-order your copy of Grimmfay today at Amazon, link down below. For more interviews, make sure you like and subscribe, and thanks for getting Perty Nerdy with us.